Welcome everyone to this session. I'm Jordan Hammond, and I am a lecturer in church history and Wesley studies at Nazarene Theological College in Manchester, and director of the Manchester Wesley Research Center. Just to remind you to mute during the section. During this session, and that the procedure is to post your questions in using the Q&A feature. So to type out your questions. We're not doing live, but just typed questions. So I have the privilege to introduce the book author, whose book we're focusing on for this session, and that is Dr. Andrew Pottenger. He is an adjunct lecturer in church history. He has been lecturing at Nazarene Bible College in Colorado Springs, Colorado since 2019, and also will be working for Kansas Christian College as well. The book very much reflects his current research interests, which are in religion and power in the later Roman Empire and in early Christianity. And the book that we're going to be discussing and that you'll hear more about is, the title is Power and Rhetoric in the Ecclesiastical Correspondence of Constantine the Great. And that has been published in the Routledge Monographs in Classical Studies series in 2022. He has also published an article, essay in Studies in Church History, volume 54 on Church and Empire. And the essay in there is The Servant of God, Divine Favor and Instrumentality under Constantine 318 to 25. Additionally, Andrew has published a number of book reviews recently. I think he's in the process now of trying to discern his next project after the one that we're going to discuss today, and is open to co-writing or co-editing projects. So Andrew, I'll turn it over to you now to tell us about your book, and then we'll move from there to questions and discussion.
Andrew, you are muted. Please unmute yourself.
There we go. How's that? Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Thank you, Jordan, for the introduction, and thank you also to the organizers and everyone for being here in this session. This work is a historical study that examines closely particular strategies of rhetoric and surviving correspondence by the Emperor Constantine. These are letters that deal mainly with conflicts among Christians, specifically what we remember as the Donatist Schism and the Arian controversy. The purpose of the work is to contribute to our understanding of how and why this emperor intervened in matters internal to the churches. What do these letters of Constantine show us that he might have assumed about imperial power when first encountering these conflicts and subsequently working with Christian leadership to resolve them? How did any such assumptions affect his actual use of power in regard to the issues that divided these Christian subjects? In the work, I contend that three doctrines of imperial power can be discerned in the rhetoric of his surviving correspondence on these conflicts. These doctrines, which I describe as the doctrine of divine favor and agency, two, the doctrine of ecclesiastical unity, and third, the doctrine of resistance and compromise, These three doctrines functioned as Constantine's guiding assumptions concerning his use of power as he engaged with these problems of schism and heresy. To my knowledge, at least, and I've still been looking into this as well, to my knowledge, there isn't any other scholarship that provides such focused analysis of so extensive a selection of his surviving words that also takes account of his figurative as well as explicit language related to division and unity. Also, to my knowledge, there aren't any other studies that are examining as thoroughly the formative years of this emperor's approach to these controversies, which I emphasize here being the period roughly 312 to 328. This approach helps explain how, along with why, Constantine's involvement in the internal church conflicts initially developed. Doing this, exploring these matters from his perspective, provides a detailed view of imperial power in relation to the churches beyond his role simply as Pontifex Maximus. It also helps deepen our understanding of how Constantine exercised imperial authority with respect to ecclesiastical structures. After a brief introduction of the whole topic, my overall approach, the first chapter sets up analysis in the rest of the book by placing these letters of Constantine within the context of imperial government rather than late antique epistolography. And then chapters 2 through 5 represent the core of the project, which analyze prominent themes, figurative language, and persuasive techniques in his language, thereby linking communication with decision-making activity in order to define and describe each of these three doctrines of power. Chapter 2 discusses the doctrine of divine favor and agency, in which Constantine sought to align himself with the supreme God who was worshipped by Christians and remained concerned primarily in these letters with being seen to rule successfully as the servant of God in ways that publicly demonstrate his gratitude as a beneficiary of divine assistance. Chapter 3 on the doctrine of ecclesiastical unity reveals more specifically what such unity involved for Constantine in light of his perspective on the different types of divisions among Christians. In the case of the Donatist schism, Constantine wanted to achieve like a organizational or a structural uniformity. And in the case of heresy later on, he satisfied himself with pursuing a general harmony that emphasized communion while leaving room for some diversity of belief. In chapters 4 through 5, these belong together, and they both describe the doctrine of resistance and compromise. Chapter 4 focuses on Constantine's responses to the Donatist schism, while chapter 5 emphasizes particular changes in the emperor's language and tone when addressing himself to those involved in the Arian controversy. These two chapters together reveal the manner by which Constantine pursued his agenda for achieving unity in light of some Christians' refusal to accept it on any terms but their own. While the emperor expected obedience to his expressed will as he dealt with the Donatist schism, he learned subsequently in reference to the Arian conflict to anticipate some level of resistance and chose immediately to present compromise as the path toward unity. The sixth and final chapter shows that all three of these doctrines continued to function as Constantine's main assumptions guiding his use of authority when dealing with further problems involving Christians in conflict toward the end of his reign. Now, the book is a revised and considerably expanded version of my doctoral thesis, which was started in 2014 and completed in 2018 under Jordan's advice, along with Andy Fear for the University of Manchester. Following the successful defense of the thesis, I just proceeded immediately with work on the book by mainly adding any necessary context for a wider academic readership, along with additional research that accounted for a broader variety of non-English speaking scholarship. The result in the book, I hope, it's dry in Colorado Springs today. The result, I hope, is a reasonably well-rounded, in-depth analysis and interpretation of Constantine as I believe he presents himself in these letters with reference to these conflicts with which he was involved. One of the dealing with surprises that I came across, I think one of the most obvious that I experienced through the entire course of the research was the discovery that a lot of modern scholarship on Constantine is largely biographical in nature, and it kind of approaches his whole lifetime within a larger context of the changes affecting the empire throughout the 3rd and 4th centuries. And given the vast amount of material written on Constantine since his own lifetime, I was rather surprised to find so much general biography or historical narrative, but so little focused, in-depth analysis. Really none, until I think Noel Linsky's Constantine and the Cities does some of that subsequently. A few of my broader conclusions about Constantine's historical significance were also surprising. For example, I don't accept the idea that Constantine established a Christian empire or even attempted to convert the empire to Christianity even after becoming sole emperor in 324. I see Constantine as acting out of lengthy and more or less established imperial tradition and precedent, rather than with an eye to the future in terms of establishing Christianity as a powerful cultural or political force. Further, I don't believe church and state combined under his rule. This was a debate I had with a scholar early on in my research. Quite the opposite. I view religion and politics, which those of us who study the ancient world know were never conceptually separated at any time. I see religion as politics as actually kind of beginning a very long process of eventually becoming distinct spheres as we know them. Finally, I was surprised at how irrelevant the Constantinian questions regarding the authenticity of his faith, is Constantine a Christian or not, or the precision or lack thereof in his theology. I was surprised by how irrelevant these questions are, even though they're asked all the time, to the issue of understanding his engagement with ecclesiastical conflicts. Now, the book as a whole represents an interpretation of Constantine's correspondence regarding matters of unity and division among Christians. It's also a study of imperial rule through written communication during a particular late Roman reign. Now, I'm not suggesting that these 3 doctrines of power for which I argue in this work enabled Constantine to succeed in resolving conflicts between Christians. Rather, I'm arguing that they guided him in his process of engaging with these controversies. They helped the emperor communicate his policies and intentions regarding the divided churches, and also were tools of persuasion by which he tried to win their compliance. While a permanent solution in terms of unity was never reached, Constantine's method for responding to these problems allowed him to advance the church further toward unity than was demonstrably possible apart from his involvement. The subsequent competition for imperial support among various Christian factions attests to their recognition of the potential power of emperors after Constantine to ratify and enforce ecclesiastical decisions. And again, I would like to thank the organizers. Thank you, Jordan, for taking the time for your good introduction. And Andy is not here, but I also want to give proper credit to Andy Fear at the University of Manchester for his assistance with the research in this work. Thank you.